Mom just kicked me out in front of everyone. I didn't say it out loud. It just slammed around in my skull the second Lorraine, my mother, set her fork down and looked straight at me with that familiar sugar-sweet expression she used when she wanted the room to follow her lead. "Avery, finish your plate and head out," she said, calm as if she were reminding me to grab a napkin. "It's time you stopped leaning on this family." The dining room didn't get louder. It got colder, despite the fireplace crackling in the corner. The roasted chicken still smelled like butter and herbs. The table still looked magazine perfect, but the air felt like someone had quietly pulled the oxygen out. My eyes flicked around on instinct, searching for a protest, a grimace, anything that said this was a mistake. Nothing. My dad, Martin, kept his head down and cut his meat into neat little squares, careful and detached. My brother Nolan cleared his throat and stared into his water glass like it might hand him a safe-line. And my youngest brother, Chase, leaned back with the faintest curl at the corner of his mouth, like he'd paid for front-row seats. Leaning on the family? The words scraped at me like sandpaper, because if anyone had been leaning on someone, it wasn't me. I'd lived in the quiet role in this house for as long as I could remember. Not the favorite, not the rebel, the one in the middle, the one who handled things before they became problems, the one who made the calls, smoothed the sharp edges, showed up at midnight with medicine, covered small gaps everyone swore were temporary. I did it without drama, almost like muscle memory, because it was the only way I knew how to belong. And now my mother was saying I depended on them? Lorraine's smile stayed in place, thin, practiced, unbothered. She wasn't angry, she didn't raise her voice. That's what made it terrifying. It meant she'd planned this. She'd chosen the setting on purpose, a holiday meal, a full table, witnesses in every seat, so her words would land like truth. "Avery," Nolan said, his voice soft, the way he always got when he wanted everything to stay peaceful. "Mom just wants you to grow up a little. You've been kind of distant lately." Distant? I almost laughed. People call you distant when they're used to taking from you and not used to giving back. Chase clicked his tongue, half smiling. "If you're struggling, just say it. Nobody's judging you." I looked at my little brother for a long second. He said it so lightly, like life was always a game he'd never had to lose. And suddenly I understood something with painful clarity. Nobody at that table actually wanted me to speak. They wanted me to slide back into the old position, quiet, useful, and conveniently invisible. Lorraine tipped her head, waiting. She knew my patterns. If I argued, she'd call me ungrateful. If I cried, she'd call me dramatic. If I apologized, she'd win clean. But something inside my chest stood up anyway, something cool and steady, not loud, not angry, more like a line being drawn across the floor. This is the boundary. I set my glass down. The clink against the wood sounded sharper than it should have. "Okay," I said. My voice surprised even me. Flat, calm. My mother blinked. Nolan froze for half a beat. Chase's smirk faltered. For the first time in a long time, all of them looked thrown off because I wasn't playing my role. I pushed my chair back. The scrape of the legs across the tiles stretched out lonely and loud. I slipped on my coat, grabbed my bag, and offered a polite bye, the way you do with strangers. Then I walked out before anyone could build a new performance called "Let's Talk About This." Outside, the cold wind hit my face hard, and weirdly, it felt more honest than the warm, fake calm inside that dining room. I got into my car and wrapped my hands around the steering wheel. My heart wasn't racing. My fingers weren't shaking. I just felt empty. Bright, clean empty, like the moment you finally admit the thing you've been trying to save was never yours to begin with. I drove back to my apartment, went up the stairs, and closed the door behind me. The silence inside was so deep I could hear the refrigerator hum. I stood in the middle of my living room like it was the first time I'd ever been alone without orbiting somebody else's mood. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just kicked off my shoes, dropped my keys on the table, and opened my laptop. The screen cast a cool blue light over my hands. I didn't open social media. I didn't call a friend to vent. I opened something real, something practical, something that had kept me tied to my family through invisible strings. Accounts, bills, auto payments. The list was longer than I expected. I stared at it, not because of the numbers, but because of the feeling that hit me like betrayal. They genuinely believed I was the one taking, when I had been the one holding the whole thing up. My cursor hovered over the word cancel. In my head, my mother's voice floated back, soft as a scalpel. Stop leaning on the family. I exhaled slowly, steady. Fine, I whispered to the empty room. I'll do exactly what you want. And then I clicked. I didn't wake up the next morning feeling brave. I woke up feeling hollow, like someone had scooped the center out of me and left the edges standing out of habit. My apartment was quiet in a way that made every sound feel too sharp. The kettle clicking on, the floorboards creaking under my feet, the neighbor's dog barking down the hall. I kept waiting for the aftershock, for the tears, for the rage, for the part where I drove back to my mother's house and begged my way into the circle again. But nothing like that came. What came instead was clarity, cold, steady clarity, like the kind you get after an illness breaks and you realize you've been running a fever for years. I made coffee and opened my laptop again, not because I wanted to start a war, but because I wanted to see the truth in black and white. It was all there. The little things. The things that were never little once you stacked them month after month, year after year. The cabin's utilities under my login, because Lorraine didn't want to deal with the hassle. The phone plan in my name, because you're better with paperwork. The insurance on the cabin, because you already have an account, just add it. The streaming subscriptions, the roadside assistance, the maintenance fees, the random emergency charges that always came with the promise to pay me back next month. Next month never came. At first, it happened the way small betrayals always happen, slowly, disguised as normal. Lorraine would call with that tired sigh she used as currency. Avery, honey, can you just cover this one thing, just until we figure it out? Then Nolan would echo it later, smoother, more reasonable. You know, Mom, it's easier if you handle it. We'll make it right. Chase didn't even pretend. He'd just toss a grin at me across the room. You're the responsible one. Responsible, like it was a compliment and not a sentence. I'd tell myself it was temporary. I'd tell myself it was what family did. And sometimes I'd even believe it, because believing it hurt less than admitting I was being used. The problem with being the dependable one is nobody notices you until you stop. I stared at my bank dashboard and the list of scheduled payments, and I felt something in me harden, not into bitterness, but into resolve. I wasn't going to announce what I was doing. No dramatic group text, no "after everything I've done for you" speech. Lorraine would twist that into evidence that I was unstable, emotional, childish. She'd turn it into a story where she was the calm mother dealing with a daughter who overreacts. So I did it quietly, cleanly, like shutting off valves in a house before a storm hits. First, the cabin. People in my family called it the Mercer place, like it was a kingdom passed down through blood. But the paperwork didn't care what they called it. The utility account was mine. The auto pay was mine. The email confirmations went to me. My cursor hovered over the cancellation button, and for a moment my throat tightened. Not because I felt guilty, because I didn't, because I could already hear Lorraine's voice in my head, scorched with outrage. How could you do this to us? The thing is, I wasn't doing anything to them. I was simply stepping back and letting reality touch them directly for the first time in years. I clicked cancel. A confirmation popped up. Are you sure? I didn't hesitate. Yes. The screen refreshed. A small line of text appeared. Autopay has been turned off. It should have felt like revenge. It didn't. It felt like putting down a heavy box I'd been carrying so long my arms had believed the pain was normal. Next was the phone plan, 4 lines bundled under my name, because years ago Lorraine had insisted it was cheaper this way. I remembered the exact day we set it up. She'd stood beside me in the store, smiling at the employee, letting me sign everything while she held her purse like she was doing me a favor by being present. Just put it under Avery. She's organized. Organized. That was her favorite word for useful. I logged in, I removed my card, I turned off autopay, I set the account to manual payment only. Then the insurance portal, then the cabin's internet, then the recurring maintenance fee that had been quietly climbing every year without anyone ever mentioning it, because why would they when it never hit their bank account? Each time I clicked, a new email slid into my inbox. Your changes have been processed. Your autopay has been updated. It felt strange, watching a paper trail form, line by line, proof of how much of my life had been tied to theirs without anyone ever saying my name out loud. Around noon, I paused and leaned back in my chair. The room spun slightly, not from panic, but from exhaustion. I realized I'd been holding my breath for hours. I stood up, walked to the window, and stared down at the street. Cars moved, people carried groceries, a woman laughed into her phone. Life kept going, completely indifferent to the fact that my family's entire normal was about to crack. That's when something else hit me, something quieter, deeper. I wasn't scared of their anger. I was scared of how easily they convinced me that my boundaries were cruelty. So I did the one thing Lorraine could never argue with. I documented. I opened a folder on my desktop and started dragging everything into it. Statements, receipts, confirmation emails, screenshots of account ownership, notes I'd kept for myself over the years, dates, amounts, the reason given each time. I didn't know yet what they'd try to do, but I knew Lorraine. When she lost control, she didn't reflect, she escalated, she rewrote history, she gathered witnesses. So I gathered facts. By late afternoon, the folder was thick enough to make my chest ache. I closed my laptop and sat still, listening to the quiet of my apartment like it was a new language. No one called, no one texted, and that was almost worse, because I could feel the storm forming in the distance, the way you can smell rain before the first drop hits. That night, I showered, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark, innocent. Right when I started to drift, it buzzed once. A single notification. Not a message, not a call, just a payment alert from an account I'd turned off. Something small, routine, automatic. Payment failed. I stared at the words until they blurred, and in that moment, I understood exactly what would happen next. They wouldn't ask what happened, they'd demand that I fix it. The first sign something was wrong wasn't a screaming voicemail or a dramatic text. It was silence. For 2 full days after I started cutting the cords, nobody reached out. Not my mother, not Nolan, not Chase. That was classic Lorraine. She believed silence was a leash. If she starved you of contact long enough, you'd come crawling back just to feel normal again. On the 3rd day, my phone rang at 6:42 in the morning. Dad. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then it rang again and again. By the 4th call, my stomach tightened. Not with fear, but with recognition. This wasn't concern. This was damage control. I finally answered on the 5th ring. Hey. Avery, Dad said, and his voice was already pitched higher than usual, like he'd been running. Where are you? In my apartment, I said. Why? A pause. I heard paper shuffling, the faint clink of a mug, background noise, Lorraine's kitchen, not his. He was calling from her house. Of course he was. There's an issue, he said carefully, like he was trying to land a plane in fog. Your mom can't get into the accounts. I leaned back against my couch, watching the morning light crawl across the floor. What accounts? The cabin utilities, he said, then rushed the words as if speed would make them softer. The phone plan, the insurance portal, the card keeps declining, Avery, and the power company said they can't talk to your mother because the account's not in her name. I let that sit between us. Dad cleared his throat. Did you change something? Yeah, I said. I stopped paying for things I don't own. His inhale hitched. Avery, sweetheart. There it was, the pet name, the softening, the angle. Dad, I said, still calm, I didn't touch your personal bank. I didn't take anyone's money. I just turned off auto payments that were set up under me. But we need those, he blurted. Then quickly, I mean, we didn't realize you were still handling them. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was insulting. You didn't realize, I repeated. So for years, you thought the cabin insurance paid itself, the phone plan paid itself, the streaming services paid themselves, the maintenance fees paid themselves, like a fairy came in at night with a credit card? Avery, Dad said, voice dropping into that pleading tone he used when he wanted to avoid conflict, your mom's upset. You know how she gets. Just, can you turn everything back on and we can talk about it? We'll talk about it, I said slowly, tasting the phrase. It meant put the machine back together first, then we'll decide how grateful you should be. I'll talk, I said, but I'm not turning anything back on. He exhaled, sharp and shaky. Lorraine is right here. I didn't need him to say it. I could hear her breathing now, close to the phone, listening. Then her voice slid in, smooth as satin and twice as suffocating. Avery. I closed my eyes. My mother always said my name like she owned it. Hi, Mom, I said. What is this little stunt? She asked, light and amused, like I'd put a prank candle in a cupcake. Do you know how embarrassing it is to call the utility company and have them treat me like a stranger? I imagined her in her crisp cardigan, standing in her perfect kitchen, hand on her hip, offended, not by the inconvenience, but by the disrespect. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm just doing what you told me. I'm not leaning on the family anymore. Her laugh was small, controlled. Don't twist my words. Then explain them, I said. A beat of silence. Then the tone changed, cooler, harder. You're punishing us because you didn't like being corrected. Corrected, like I was a misbehaving employee. No, I said. I'm stepping out of the role you assigned me, the one where I pay and nobody notices until it stops. Lorraine's voice sharpened. You owe this family, Avery. Everything you have because of us. I looked around my apartment, my second-hand couch, the chipped coffee table, the cheap lamp I'd bought on sale. Everything I had because I worked, because I saved, because I went without. I owe you respect, I said evenly. I don't owe you my bank account. She made a noise of disgust like I'd tracked mud across her clean floor. You're being dramatic. Nolan's voice cut in suddenly, too bright. Avery, listen, this is getting out of hand. We're not asking you to pay forever. Just turn things back on so Mom can breathe and we can figure out a better system. I pictured him standing behind her, trying to play mediator while still protecting the person with the most power. A better system, I said. You mean one where I keep paying but you call it family? Avery, Nolan said, warning creeping in, don't do this. Don't do what? I asked. Be honest? Chase jumped in, voice dripping with mock sympathy. You're acting like a victim. If you wanted credit, you could have just said something. My jaw tightened. I did say something, for years. You didn't hear it because it didn't benefit you to hear it. Lorraine snapped. Enough. If you won't fix this willingly, we'll handle it another way. There it was, the threat finally stepping out from behind the smile. How? I asked. You'll see, she said, sweet again. Your father will bring you by later. We can sign papers, make things right. My stomach sank, not because I was scared, but because I knew that phrase too. Papers, sign, make things right. It meant trap you into agreeing to something you'd regret the minute you walked out the door. I'm not signing anything, I said. Lorraine's voice went flat. Then you leave us no choice. The call ended, not with goodbye, with a click that felt like a door being locked. For the rest of the day, texts poured in like water through a broken dam. Nolan pleading for peace, Dad begging for one conversation, Chase tossing in little barbs disguised as jokes. I didn't answer. That evening, a knock hit my door. 3 sharp raps, too formal to be a neighbor. When I opened it, a courier stood there holding a thick envelope, certified, my name printed cleanly across the front. My pulse didn't spike. It steadied, like my body already knew this was coming. I signed, closed the door, and set the envelope on my kitchen counter. For a long moment, I just stared at it, listening to my own breathing in the quiet. Then I slid my finger under the seal. The first page had my mother's name at the top, Lorraine Mercer, followed by words that made my mouth go dry. Petition, claim, emergency relief, and at the bottom, in bold, a date, for a hearing that was way too soon. Lorraine wasn't trying to talk anymore. She was trying to take something from me. And she had no idea that the moment she filed this desperate grab for control, she'd just tripped the very wire she didn't know existed. The envelope sat on my counter like a live wire. I didn't open it again that night, but I didn't need to. The words had branded themselves into my brain. Petition, claim, emergency relief. Like my mother had taken a red marker to my life and started circling what she wanted. By morning, the hollow feeling was gone. In its place was something sharper. Focus. I called in sick to work, not because I couldn't show up, but because I refused to be distracted. Lorraine Mercer didn't file emergency relief because she wanted a conversation. She filed it because she wanted leverage. She wanted to corner me into reacting, into making one emotional mistake she could hold up in court like proof that I was unstable. So I did the opposite. I got dressed like a person who had nothing to hide. Black jeans, a plain sweater, hair pulled back, no lipstick, no armor, just clean lines and steady hands. Then I drove to the one person in town Lorraine hated because she couldn't charm her, an attorney named Dana West. Dana's office was in an old brick building near the courthouse, the kind with scuffed wood floors and furniture that didn't try too hard. She met me in the lobby, tall and calm, with eyes that didn't blink away from hard truths. She didn't ask how I was doing. She asked, "Do you have the paperwork?" I handed over the petition. Dana scanned it fast, the way you scan something you already know is ugly. Her jaw tightened once, just slightly. "She's alleging you interfered with marital property and joint assets," Dana said. "She's also implying you're withholding access to family resources." I swallowed. Family resources? Dana looked up. Translation, she wants a judge to force you to pay. A cold little laugh tried to escape my throat. I forced it back down. Dana flipped pages. And here we go. She's claiming the cabin is family property and that you're committing financial sabotage by turning off utilities. "It's not sabotage," I said, the words precise. "It's my account." Dana nodded once, like she'd already expected that. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. No feelings, just facts." So I gave her facts. I told her how the utility accounts were in my name, how the auto pay came from my card, how the insurance portal was under my login, how I'd been paying quietly because it was easier than fighting, how Lorraine had humiliated me at the holiday table, told me to stop leaning on the family, and I'd taken her at her word. Dana didn't react the way most people did when you said, "My mother did this." She didn't gasp, she didn't flinch, she just kept writing. When I finished, she slid her notepad aside. "Okay, now the cabin. Who's on the deed?" I blinked. "My parents." Dana's pen paused. "Are you sure?" "That's what they've always said," I replied. And as soon as I said it, my stomach tightened. Because Lorraine didn't say things because they were true. She said them because she wanted them to be treated as true. Dana leaned back. "What do you have in writing?" I I have emails, statements, auto pay confirmations, receipts. That's good, but I want county records. Today. My pulse quickened, not from fear, from the sense that we were finally moving into daylight. Dana made 2 calls. 10 minutes later, we were in her car driving toward the records office. The courthouse loomed like a block of stone, indifferent and permanent. At the records counter, Dana requested the deed history for the cabin property, parcel number, address, all of it. The clerk disappeared into the back and returned with printed sheets. Dana spread them out on the table like a card dealer. My eyes moved over the lines, searching for my parents' names. Martin Mercer, Lorraine Mercer. I found them, then my breath caught, because their names weren't where I expected. They were listed on an older document years back, but the most recent deed was different. Dana tapped a date with her nail. This is the current recorded deed. My mouth dried. Read it. Dana slid the paper toward me. And there it was, in crisp black letters, like it had been waiting for me to finally look. Avery Hart. My name. Not as a cosigner, not as a beneficiary, as the owner. For a second, the room blurred, like my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. I grabbed the edge of the table. "That's not possible," I whispered. Dana's voice stayed steady. "It's possible. It's real. And it's recorded." I stared at the date again. 6 years ago. The same year my grandmother died. The same year Lorraine had been so overwhelmed she'd asked me to handle paperwork, just temporarily. My throat tightened as memory rearranged itself. Dana flipped to another page. "Here's the instrument that transferred it. It looks like a quitclaim from your grandmother's trust." My chest thudded hard. My grandmother hated paperwork. She hated drama. She loved me. Dana nodded like she'd heard this story in 100 different forms. "This explains the pattern. They let you put everything under your name because they assumed they could control you anyway." I stared at my name again. Ink on paper, recorded in a system Lorraine couldn't manipulate with tears or charm. "And the petition?" I asked, voice hoarse. Dana's eyes sharpened. This is where it gets interesting. She pulled out a stapled attachment from the deed packet and pointed to a highlighted paragraph. "It's a reverter clause. Your grandmother's trust included language that if anyone challenges ownership or attempts to force transfer through dispute, especially within the family, the property reverts cleanly to the named owner with enhanced protections." I blinked. "Meaning?" Dana smiled, and it wasn't warm. It was satisfied. "Meaning, your mother just tripped the alarm your grandmother built into the house." A quiet sound escaped me, half laugh, half sob, but I didn't let it bloom. I couldn't afford emotions yet. "So what happens now?" I asked. Dana gathered the documents into a neat stack. "Now we respond. We don't panic, we don't yell, we don't do anything your mother can film, twist, or parade in front of a judge." My phone buzzed in my pocket like it knew it was being talked about. I pulled it out. A text from Nolan. "We need to meet, today. Mom is freaking out. Just fix the payments and we'll settle this." Another buzz. From Dad. "Please, come by. Let's talk like adults." Then the third one. From Lorraine. "If you don't come sign the documents we prepared, you will regret it." Dana watched my face as I read. "She's trying to get you alone. She wants you in a room she controls." I swallowed. "So we don't give her that?" Dana nodded. "We choose the location. We choose the time. We choose the terms." I stared down at the stack of papers with my name on it, proof of a truth I'd never been allowed to claim. A strange calm settled over me. "Public place," I said. "No house, no family meeting, somewhere with cameras." Dana's eyes approved. "Good. And you don't go without me." I exhaled slowly, the way you do before you push open a door you've been scared of your whole life. because Lorraine thought she'd filed a threat. What she'd actually done was hands me the one thing she could never take away again, the facts. And now, for the first time, I wasn't walking into a confrontation as the family's quiet support beam. I was walking in as the person who owned the ground under their feet.
They chose the place like they always did, somewhere they thought they could control the optics. Lorraine suggested the country club. Nolan texted me a photo of the entrance like a hint. Please, let's keep this classy. So I picked a place with better cameras and cheaper coffee, a bright little cafe 2 blocks from the courthouse, all glass windows and hard edges, where you could see everyone before they saw you. Dana met me outside. She looked the same way she always looked. Clean blazer, calm eyes, zero patience for theatrics. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. I'm done being afraid of my mother's tone. We walked in together. Lorraine was already there, sitting at a small table near the front like she'd staged it. Perfect posture, perfect hair, a cream coat folded neatly on the chair beside her. Nolan sat close, angled toward her, the human shield. Dad was across from them, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes darting. Chase leaned back in his seat like the whole thing was entertainment. When Lorraine saw me, she smiled, tight and triumphant, until she noticed Dana at my side. The smile didn't drop, but it stiffened. "Avery," she said, voice sweet as iced tea. "Finally." Dana didn't sit until I sat. Then she placed a slim folder on the table like a quiet warning. Lorraine's gaze flicked to it. "And who is this?" "My attorney," I said. Nolan's face flashed with irritation before he buried it under concern. "Avery, come on. We didn't need lawyers for this." Lorraine sighed dramatically, as if I'd shown up with a weapon. "This is exactly what I mean. You're escalating. You're making us look like monsters." I looked at her, really looked, at the careful softness, the practiced hurt, the way she still believed she could frame the story and everyone would play their part. "You filed an emergency petition," I said, calm. "You escalated." Dad flinched. Chase let out a low whistle like he'd heard a good line in a movie. Lorraine's smile sharpened. "I protected the family. That's what mothers do." Dana opened the folder without asking permission. "Mrs. Mercer, we're here to resolve the misunderstanding in your filing, not to debate feelings." Lorraine's eyes narrowed at the word misunderstanding, like it offended her more than any insult could. Nolan leaned forward, voice low and urgent. "Avery, just turn the payments back on. That's all. Then we can talk about who covers what going forward. We'll make it fair." Fair. He said it like it was a new invention. I slid my phone on the table and opened my banking app. No dramatic slam, just proof in plain sight. "I'm not turning anything back on," I said. "I stopped paying for things I don't own." Lorraine's lips parted. "Don't you dare." Dana cut in, crisp. "Actually, that's the key point, because Miss Hart does own it." The cafe noise didn't stop, but the air at our table changed. Dad's eyes lifted. Nolan's forehead creased. Chase's posture shifted for the first time all afternoon. Lorraine laughed, small, controlled. "Oh, please, the cabin belongs to the family." Dana slid one document across the table. Recorded deed, current owner, Avery Hart. Lorraine stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. Then her eyes snapped up, bright with fury. "That's impossible," she said. "It's recorded with the county," Dana replied. "It's not a matter of opinion." Dad reached for the document with shaking hands. He read it twice, like the words might rearrange themselves out of loyalty. Nolan leaned over his shoulder, scanning fast. His face lost color. Chase blinked. "Wait, you own the cabin?" I didn't answer Chase. I kept my eyes on Lorraine because this was always about her. 6 years ago, Dana continued, your mother's trust transferred the property. Miss Hart was the named owner, and there's more. Dana placed the second page down, highlighted.
The trust includes a reverter clause. If anyone attempts to challenge the ownership through dispute or coercion within the family, it triggers protective provisions favoring the recorded owner. Lorraine's nostrils flared. That's absurd. Dana's voice stayed level. It's standard estate planning when a grantor anticipates family conflict. Dad's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a man waking up in a room he didn't recognize. Nolan leaned over his shoulder, scanning fast. His face lost color. Chase blinked. Wait, Mom, did you know about this? Lorraine didn't look at him. She looked at me. And in that stare was something raw. Rage, yes, but also panic, because she couldn't charm paper. She couldn't guilt a county record. She couldn't punish a legal fact. You're doing this to hurt us, her voice trembling now, the performance shifting from control to victim. I shook my head once. No, I'm doing this to stop being hurt. Lorraine slapped her palm against the table, hard enough for a couple people to glance over. After everything I've done for you. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached into my bag and slid my own folder out. Receipts, statements, confirmations, stacked neat and quiet. Here's everything I paid, I said. Every utility bill, every insurance premium, every temporary expense that lasted years. You called it family, I called it obligation. The difference is, you never intended to carry any of it. Chase muttered, "Damn." Dad stared at the stack like it weighed 100 pounds. "Avery," he whispered, and it sounded like the first honest sentence he'd spoken in years. I nodded. "I hope you mean that." I stood, not rushed, not dramatic, just done. Outside, the winter air hit my lungs clean and sharp. The sun was low, turning the street gold. I walked to my car and felt something unfamiliar settle into my bones. Not victory, freedom. Because revenge would have been making them suffer the way they made me suffer. What I did was simpler. I stopped letting them. And if you've ever been the one holding everyone up, quietly, endlessly, then you know how loud that kind of silence can be when you finally set the weight down. If this story hit you somewhere personal, let me know in the comments. Share what boundary you've been afraid to draw. And if you want more real, raw stories about reclaiming your life with calm strength, like, subscribe, and stay with me here on Still Waters Payback.